We all Google random things every day. Recipes, movie trivia, how to spell restaurant, but there are some searches that take you to a dark corner of the internet. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. Today we're diving into disturbing things you should never Google unless you want the heebie-jeebies for the rest of the week. Picture a happy cicada emerging from the ground after years underground, ready to buzz for the whole summer. But something is very, very wrong. Instead of a normal body, its entire backside is missing, replaced with a chalky white mass of fungus. This is Massospora, a parasite that infects cicadas and takes over their brain. What's disturbing is that the fungus produces chemicals similar to hallucinogens, which make the cicada hyperactive. Even though half its body has rotted away, it keeps flying, it keeps mating, and keeps spreading spores. Basically, it's like a real-life zombie bug. Googling this will show you photos of cicadas with their abdomens missing, a puff of white fungus where their body should be, still buzzing around like nothing is wrong. It's disgusting, and it's terrifying, and it's also 100% real, unfortunately. In the 1950s, residents of Minamata, Japan started noticing something strange about the local cats. The animals were twitching, convulsing, and moving as if possessed. Some even danced around uncontrollably before dropping dead. At first, people thought it was just odd cat behavior, but soon humans started showing similar symptoms: tremors, slurred speech, hallucinations, and in severe cases, death. The cause was later discovered to be mercury poisoning from industrial waste dumped into the bay. The mercury built up in the fish, the cats ate the fish, and the people, they ate both. Googling this pulls up haunting images of sick cats and later tragic photographs of Minamata disease victims. It's disturbing not just because of the symptoms, but because it's a chilling reminder of what happens when pollution spirals out of control. If you've been around here for a while, you might know that I absolutely do not like spiders, so this is a fact that makes me feel itchy. Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing hundreds of spiders falling on top of you. In Brazil, that's not just a nightmare, it's real. Every few years, videos appear online showing what looks like spider rain. In reality, it's a species of spider that creates massive webs high up in trees and power lines. When the webs break apart, it looks like the spiders are literally falling from the sky. Locals describe it as stepping outside into a horror movie, and I think it sounds like stepping into the 9th circle of hell. If you Google spider rain Brazil, you'll see footage of an entire sky filled with crawling, dangling spiders. Absolutely disgusting. Don't you agree? Lols. This one is controversial, and that makes it even creepier to Google. Full Google rabbit hole with this one. Morgellons is a condition where people believe fibers or threads are growing out of their skin. Patients describe feeling constant crawling sensations like bugs under the skin, and they often collect strange fibers that they say come from their bodies. The medical community is split. Some doctors argue it's a form of delusional parasitosis, while others say environmental contamination or unknown infections might be involved. Googling Morgellons brings up disturbing close-up images of skin lesions filled with colored threads. Whether it's a psychiatric disorder, a medical mystery, or something else, the photos alone are enough to keep you up at night. And also the idea that we can't agree on if it's real or not. Going to doctors only to have them tell you it's just made up. This is like 2 horror stories in one. Here's a disturbing one that doesn't involve diseases or parasites, thankfully, but it's unsettling in a completely different way. In Gabon, Africa, scientists discovered something unbelievable: a series of natural nuclear reactors. 2 billion years ago, uranium deposits in the ground went through natural fission, creating self-sustaining nuclear reactions. For hundreds of thousands of years, these reactors released radiation underground, all without human involvement. It's like nature built its own Chernobyl long before people existed. Googling the Oklo fossil reactors will pull up diagrams and photos from the site, and it's disturbing to realize that the Earth itself once ran nuclear power, and it could theoretically happen again. In 2017, sewer workers in London made a disgusting discovery that still haunts people today. Deep in the sewers, they found a massive fatberg, a solid, rock-like mass made of congealed fat, cooking grease, diapers, wipes, and whatever else people flushed down the drain. This one weighed 130 tons and stretched the length of 2 football fields. Breaking it down took weeks of manual labor, and the descriptions from workers are stomach-turning. Googling London fatberg brings up photos of what looks like a giant, pulsating blob of waste stuck in the sewers. It's disturbing because it's not fiction, it's the reality of what happens under our cities when we treat the sewer system like a trash can. I feel like any person who had to deal with that deserves early retirement.
Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night only to discover that you can't move your arms or legs? Not only that, but you can't seem to muster up the ability to make a sound. And so when you see a dark, scraggly demon lurking at the foot of your bed or sitting directly on top of you, all you can do is sit there and stare at it, feeling nothing but pure terror. Well, if you have, it sounds like you've been visited by a Phi-am. The Phi-am has its roots in Thai folklore, where it is believed to be the lesser-known cause of the well-known phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Phi-ams have been known to sit on their victims' chests in the middle of the night, restricting their movement and instilling fear into their souls, and in extreme cases, crushing their lungs entirely and taking their lives. It is said that the creature tends to haunt men more than women, and so in some places where the demons are more common, men have actually been known to don traditional women's bedtime clothing to avoid being haunted by the demon. Small price to pay for not having your lungs crushed.
The Alp is a creepy creature from German folklore, and it's the stuff of nightmares, literally. Known for causing horrible nightmares, the Alp is said to sit on its victims' chests in the middle of the night, causing the sleeper to wake up in a panic, unable to breathe or move as they're crushed under the weight of the creature. Yes, this is another sleep paralysis demon. The Alp is usually described as a small elf-like being, but it can shape-shift into other forms, usually animals like cats, dogs, or snakes. It's also said to sometimes ride a horse. The Alp also wears a special cap that gives it the power to become invisible, sneak into people's homes unseen. This is just another one of the many demonic entities people used to try and explain sleep paralysis back in the day. And when people would wake up feeling terrified, unable to move, the heavy pressure on their chest, having a hallucination of something sitting on top of them or lurking at the foot of their beds, it's no wonder people thought there were malevolent demons roaming around in the night. I can only imagine how horrifying it would have been to grow up around this time. I mean, I've had sleep paralysis, and if my mother told me that it was thanks to a demon, I would just never go to bed again.
The Mongolian deathworm demon is honestly just gross. It's gross. It's gross to look at, it's gross to think about, and yet here I am talking about it to you because I respect you enough to know that you are brave enough to handle the gross demon worm. And I'm proud of you for that. Now, while many zoologists believe that the idea of the Mongolian demon worm comes from an exaggeration of real snake and worm sightings, Mongolian locals to this day claim otherwise, and many of them say that they have actually seen this giant creature for themselves and just narrowly escaped its vicious attack. You see, Mongolian deathworms are said to have a large circular row of incredibly sharp teeth and venom that acts like acid. My advice, if you're in Mongolia, avoid the desert, and maybe you will make it out alive.
This demon is about as evil and demonic as a demon can be. Lamashtu, another demon from Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology. An entity with the head of a lion and long, sharp talons and claws like a bird. Lamashtu really doesn't have any redeeming qualities. Some of her hobbies include, but are not limited to, messing with women while they're pregnant, kidnapping newborns, sucking out men's BLOOD, infesting rivers and lakes, spreading disease and sickness in general, ruining crops, and giving people nightmares. Lamashtu was so terrifyingly evil that people would often try to ward her off with the help of another demon, Pazuzu, Lamashtu's arch nemesis. The Batman to her Joker, the He-Man to her Skeletor, the list goes on, you get my point.
Imagine, you're walking home one night, it's dark, and you're all alone. All of a sudden you look up and realize you're standing face to face with the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. She has piercing eyes, shiny black hair, and then she starts to smile, exposing 2 rows of red-stained, razor-sharp teeth. You fall backwards to see that something is missing: her body. This woman isn't a woman at all, just a floating head with half a neck and a trail of guts and organs hanging out. You have stumbled across a karasu hungry for human flesh. There are many different stories regarding the origin of this creature who hunts at night and then returns to her headless body in the morning to go about her day indistinguishable from any other woman except for her tongue.
Honey is supposed to be sweet and harmless, but not all honey is safe. In parts of Nepal and Turkey, bees feed on a kind of flower that contains a natural neurotoxin. The honey they produce is called mad honey. It looks normal, but eat too much, and you experience dizziness, hallucinations, vomiting, and even heart failure. Historically, armies used mad honey to poison enemies. Today, certain thrill seekers still try it for its psychoactive effects, but cases of poisoning are well documented. Googling mad honey poisoning will show you people collapsed after consuming it, as well as locals scaling dangerous cliffs to harvest this deadly honey. The coconut crab is the largest land crab on Earth, weighing up to 9 pounds with claws strong enough to crack coconuts. But what really disturbs people is its diet. These crabs are opportunistic predators and scavengers, and there are documented cases of them hunting and eating live birds. One set of photos shows a coconut crab climbing a tree, snatching a seabird, and dragging it back down to devour it. If you Google this, you'll see the unsettling sight of a giant crab tearing apart a bird with its claws. Is it the worst thing ever in the world? Probably not, but it is deeply, deeply unsettling. This one sounds like a bad horror story, but it's very real. The tongue-eating louse is a parasitic isopod that spends its life inside a fish's mouth. It starts by swimming into the gills of the fish and then latching onto the base of the tongue. At first, it just feeds on the fish's blood, slowly draining the tongue of circulation. Over time, the tongue withers away completely. That's when the louse does something almost unbelievable. It physically takes the place of the missing tongue. The parasite attaches itself to the muscles in the mouth and basically becomes a working replacement. The fish can still eat and survive, but every time it moves its tongue, it's actually moving the parasite. There are confirmed cases in snapper, grouper, and other tropical fish, especially off the coast of California and in the Gulf of Mexico. Fishermen have posted photos online of opening up a fresh catch and finding a bug staring back at them from the mouth. Imagine cutting into your dinner and realizing its tongue has been replaced with a living creature. Scientists say it's the only known parasite in the world that can fully replace an organ, and while it doesn't usually kill the fish, it's disturbing to think about how many of these creatures could be out there hiding this creepy little secret on the inside. Nasal myiasis is one of those medical conditions that will stick in your brain forever once you see it. So sorry. Myiasis is the technical term for an infestation of fly larvae inside human tissue. One of those things that I wish I didn't know. In this case, the larvae crawl into the nasal cavity and start feeding on living flesh. It usually happens in tropical and subtropical countries where flies are common, and it's most often reported in patients who are already sick or elderly since they're less able to fight off infections. The symptoms are horrifying. Patients feel a constant crawling sensation inside their nose and face. There's intense pain, bleeding, and often a foul smell because the tissue inside is literally rotting away. I'm so sorry for saying that. In documented cases, doctors have pulled out dozens of maggots wiggling from deep inside a patient's sinus cavity. I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable. In the most extreme situations, the larvae don't stop at the nose. They can migrate into the sinuses, the eyes, and even the brain. That's when nasal myiasis can turn deadly. Medical journals contain photos and surgical footage of these removals, and they are not for the faint of heart. If you Google it, you'll see doctors holding tweezers and pulling out clusters of live maggots maggots that look like something out of a horror movie.
Who do you have to blame when you're sick? Other than the person who got you sick, that is. Well, if you know anything about ancient Sumerian mythology, and like blaming demons for your problems, then a sag may be responsible for your 14th trip to the toilet in the span of a day. A sag is a pretty nasty demon said to cause sickness. He's a hideous creature born from the underworld. So busted looking is he that his presence alone is said to make fish in the rivers boil, and one glimpse at the entity can cause people to fall sick and die on the spot. What's worse is that he doesn't come alone. He has an entire army of demonic offspring at his back. But how did he manage to procreate, being that people can't even look at him without dropping dead? Well, Asag didn't make love with people, he had his offspring with the mountains themselves, all the mountains in the world. So his sons and daughters are part hideous demon, part hideous rock creature.
If you've ever seen Game of Thrones, I have a feeling you're gonna like this next one. It's called a Draugr, and honestly you'd have a hard time convincing me that it wasn't the inspiration behind White Walkers. The demon comes from Nordic folklore. It's an ancient undead monster known to rise up from its grave and attack the living. Oh, and it's most active at night and in the winter. Sound familiar? When a person dies and is buried in the ground, it is believed that they will turn into a Draugr if they either practiced black magic, were executed, died an accidental death, or were buried outside a churchyard. I know, it's a broad spectrum and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is the criteria according to the Nordic folklore. Along with attacking the living, Draugrs have been known to climb onto the top of people's homes and stomp on their roofs to keep them from getting a good night's rest. If a person inside the home becomes restless and decides to leave their house, this demon will kill them. Quite easily, might I add, because they are incredibly strong. When there are no humans around, these Game of Thrones-esque zombie demons have also been known to eat livestock and tear apart fences and barns. Oh, and one more thing, the only way to kill them is to cut their heads off, burn them, and then scatter their ashes in the ground. It's a process, but probably worth it considering how aggressive these particular demons tend to be.
The Agitar is not an entity you want to run into. Much like a sag, just the sight of her alone can cause you to drop dead. Agitar comes from Finnish mythology, known not only as the devil of the woods, but the mother of the devil himself. Agitar is incredibly ugly and evil, spreading diseases and pestilence wherever she goes, and she often takes the form of a serpent. She's accompanied by them as well, and some stories even say she can control them. Snakes come up a lot in ancient myths about demonic entities. Unsurprisingly, people still fear snakes today, but especially back in the day, snakes were often seen as symbols of evil and poison in cultures across the world. People in ancient Finland believed Agitar could bring bad luck and misfortune just by being near. She was blamed for all sorts of problems, from poor harvests to outbreaks of sickness. If things started going wrong, it was said that Agitar was probably lurking nearby, making life difficult just for the sake of it, as demons do.
In Japanese folklore, there is something called yokai, which directly translated means strange apparitions. They are a class of supernatural entities and spirits whose behavior can range from benevolent and kind to mischievous, all the way to malevolent and incredibly dangerous. One such malevolent and dangerous yokai is the rokurokubi, the apparition of a woman with sharp teeth, a taste for human flesh, and a neck that can stretch out of her shoulders and slither around the room like a 50-foot long snake. One nurse, we'll call her Jackie, shared an encounter with a rokurokubi, claiming that she had been attacked by one while working at a hospital in Japan. One night, one of Jackie's patients called her over to say that a woman wearing a red kimono had been standing beside her bed the whole night, but she couldn't see the woman's face because it had been covered with long black hair. The next night, a different patient told Jackie almost the same thing, except this time, the woman's neck was stretched up so high that her head was touching the ceiling. The nurse wasn't convinced, and the hospital wing she was working at was pretty much empty, so she decided to lay down for a quick cat nap. She awoke to a phone call from her mother in the middle of the night who said, "Honey, are you okay? I had a terrible dream that you fell asleep at the hospital and a creepy woman was watching you as you slept." Upon hearing this, Jackie dropped her phone, and when she went to pick it up, she saw 2 feet underneath her bed. And And when she looked up, the outstretched neck of a woman smiling from ear to ear with dead eyes and razor-sharp teeth. I guess Jackie fainted because the next thing she knew, she woke up surrounded by hospital staff. She quit her job that day and hasn't returned to the hospital since. And honestly, I don't blame her. I'm covered in goosebumps just from reciting the story. I couldn't imagine living it.
Now, we can't talk about demons without mentioning at least another yokai. There are tons of these creatures and entities that fall under the yokai umbrella in Japanese folklore. They include demons, ghosts, monsters, and there's loads of types of each. The Enko are river-dwelling yokai, resembling monkeys. Don't let their appearance deceive you into thinking the worst they'll do is play a little trick on you though. These are some violent, sadistic animals right here, and tales about them get very graphic. Enko are said to live in rivers and along the seashore. They're kinda like kappa, who are more like turtle creatures, but these ones are way worse. They're excellent swimmers, and if you happen to come across one while taking a dip, it's probably gonna be game over for you in the worst way. See, these creatures love eating human liver, fresh human liver. Their method of obtaining it, shoving their arm right up their victim's rear end and pulling it out. The worst rectal exam you'll ever receive.
Number 10 spot, we have guinea worm disease. This is a neglected tropical disease that is caused by a parasite, and it really is just terrible. This disease unfortunately affects poor communities, especially in remote areas of the world that do not have water that is safe to drink. Basically, what happens with this disease is a person will become infected after drinking water containing the water fleas that are infected with the larva of the guinea worm. That already sounds terrible to me, but it does get worse. The worms will then penetrate the digestive tract and stay here while they grow to size. Okay, even worse. But it keeps going. About a year later, these horrible creatures will then migrate to a spot where they want to exit, normally somewhere on a lower limb. From here, they will create a very painful blister on the skin, which will eventually burst into an excruciatingly painful open wound. From here, the real nightmare starts, because not only is the pain terrible, but it will last for several weeks, while a long, sometimes up to 1 meter, string-like worm will slowly crawl out of this wound. It honestly makes me sick thinking about it. This process can have a person totally unable to really move for around 3 to 10 weeks it takes for the worm to leave the body. This is complete nightmare fuel. At this point, there isn't a treatment or prevention for this disease other than having access to safe water, of course, which should be a reality for every human. In good news, however, the number of cases of this has dropped drastically since the mid-1980s, and hopefully it could be on its way to eradication. All in all, unless you want a complete horror show and some awful imagery burned into your brain forever, maybe skip the Google search of this one. Alright, I told you what you need to know. In our number 9 spot today, we have locked-in syndrome. We've all heard of sleep paralysis, but what if I told you that there was a worse, scarier version of it? Locked-in syndrome is like sleep paralysis, but the awake version. It's a condition which renders the patient completely unable to move, aside from vertical eye movements and blinking. The patient is completely conscious and aware of what is happening, and able to communicate with eye movements, but everything else is, well, locked in. The cause of this is due to damage in the lower brain and brain stem with no damage to the upper parts. This can happen from things like poisoning, a brain stem stroke, a traumatic brain injury, or a lesion of the brain stem, as well as many other factors. The scariest thing, however, is that there is an even worse version called total locked-in syndrome, where the patient isn't even able to move their eyes. Unfortunately, most people who experience this never have any significant motor function return, as there really isn't a cure. There have been people who have made a spontaneous full recovery though, so there certainly is hope. But aside from this hope, learning about this sent me down a total rabbit hole of similar conditions I had no idea about. I don't know how people get through medical school, learning about the multitude of horrifying things that could potentially happen to a person. In our number 8 spot today, we have trypophobia. This word was really coined or created back in 2005 when someone posted about it on an online forum, and although it is not an officially recognized disorder, it is possible to be diagnosed as a specific phobia in extreme cases, and it's a thing that many of us experience on some level. Basically, Wikipedia describes trypophobia as, quote, an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns or clusters of small holes or bumps. This means that a Google search of the word will have all of the worst images for someone experiencing trypophobia popping up right at the top. It's honestly so strange how something like this could make such a large number of people horrifically uncomfortable, but alas,
It really does. Scientists aren't quite sure how trypophobia really developed. There's quite a limited understanding of it due to limited research, but right now the leading theory is that it is possible that it could be a bit of an evolutionary revulsion where we as humans associate this sort of imagery with disease or poison or other danger. Well, that is pretty fascinating. I'm just warning you. The results could be nauseating. I'm like mid-level trypophobic. I feel like I experience mild discomfort seeing these images, but I know for some people it's full-blown horror. If you're a trypophobe though, you might want to skip this next point. In our number 7 spot today we have the Suriname toad birth. Okay, so these little toads. Suriname toads are these flat, leaf-looking amphibians from South America, and they find their home in the rainforests of the area. That is all fine. Frogs are kinda cute. That is, until it's time for these guys to reproduce. That is because during mating season, the males will deposit dozens of fertilized eggs onto the females' backs. Okay, a little unusual, not too bad. Well, until that female's skin starts to grow around these eggs like bubble wrap to keep them safe. For the next few months, the eggs develop in these little special enclosures, but once it's time for birth is where the real horror starts. These little guys eventually just erupt from the back of the mom. It's just a horrifying birthing experience. And if you have trypophobia, like we just talked about, then this is truly a worst nightmare. To anyone, this is a pretty disgusting sight, but that fear will only heighten the dramatics of this one. There are plenty of videos of this birthing process all over the internet, and while some of these videos definitely went viral, it's for all of the wrong reasons.
We're going to start off the list with the Springfield 3. So it's June of 1992, and two friends, Stacy McCall and Susie Streeter, have just graduated high school. They go to their graduation party and leave at around 2:15 a.m. Their plan is to spend the night at another friend's place, Jane Kirby, and then go to a water park the next day. But Jane's place was too crowded, so they decided to sleep at Susie's mom's place. The next day, Jane and her boyfriend headed to the water park as planned. They waited around for a bit, but no sign of Susie or Stacy. Eventually, they went over to the house to see what they were up to. They knocked. No answer, knocked again, nothing. They didn't seem to be home, but the door was unlocked and all of their cars were parked outside. A few hours go by and then Stacy's mom, Janice, comes over to investigate. They all entered the home to discover that, yeah, there was nobody home. Even stranger than their cars still being outside, though all of their purses were still home. Even Susie and her mom Cheryl's cigarettes were still there. On top of that, there was no sign of a struggle. It was as if they just vanished into thin air. And with no leads, there wasn't much anyone could do but aimlessly search around. Until this day, the case is still a complete mystery. Next on the list is Mr. Cruel. So this case is incredibly creepy. From 1987 to 1990, there were 3 attacks made by a still unknown assailant in Melbourne, Australia. He wore a balaclava, so victims were never able to get a good look at his face. All we have to go off is this unsettling police sketch. The media soon dubbed him Mr. Cruel, and the name really fits. This guy broke into 3 family homes with the entire families present and would torment them. He'd tie the parents up and cut the phone lines before abducting the youngest of the family. You can only imagine the despicable things. This guy did after that. Now, fortunately, his 3 victims would eventually be released, but Mr. Cruel was never found or even identified. Alright, the Tylenol case. This incredibly disturbing case happened in 1992 in Chicago. Someone tampered with Tylenol bottles, lacing them with potassium cyanide. A young girl died, first after taking an extra strength Tylenol, then the next day, 3 members of a single family all died after consuming Tylenol from the same bottle. On top of that, 3 separate people also died that day after taking Tylenol. When it was discovered that the Janices had died as a result of Tylenol, laced with 3 times the fatal amount of cyanide, a press conference was held advising people not to take Tylenol for the time being. Eventually, this led to the product being pulled, like loads of product from the shelves, and it was recalled nationwide eventually. Now we have things like pull stickers on bottles because of incidents just like this. The case really falls into that category of crime I've always found deeply unsettling. Everything on this list is very disturbing, but the idea you could just walk into a drugstore and buy something off the shelf completely unaware that it's been poisoned by some unknown creep with a sick thrill of harming other people completely at random, absolutely nightmarish. Next up, we have the case of Russell and Shirley Dermond. Russell and Shirley were an elderly couple living in Putnam County, Georgia. They lived in a very quiet, safe neighborhood. Nothing bad ever happened there. But sometime between May 1st of 2014, when they were last known to be alive, and May 4th, when they failed to show up to an event they'd planned to attend with their neighbors, the couple met a grisly end. One neighbor, growing concerned, decided to check on them. He knocked on their door and got no answer, but the door was unlocked. He eventually made a horrific discovery. Russell's decapitated body was lying in the garage, but Shirley was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until 10 days later that Shirley's body was found in a lake about 5 miles from the home. She'd suffered blunt force trauma to the head, and sadly the case was a total dead end. There were no witnesses, no evidence of a motive behind the attack, let alone a suspect, so the case remains unsolved to this day. Russell's head hasn't even been found. Next, we have the mysterious death of Robert Wan. So this is a very, very strange case. So on the night of August 2nd of 2006, Wan, who is a lawyer, was staying at the home of 3 friends, Joseph Prince, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward, in Washington, D.C. That night he was supposed to sleep in a guest room, but he was found dead in the room from stab wounds. The 3 housemates called the police, claiming that an unknown intruder must have entered the house, but investigators found little evidence of any forced entry, and even stranger, there were no signs of a struggle, as if one hadn't tried to defend himself at all. This meant he was likely incapacitated with a paralyzing agent before being stabbed. The other strange part was the lack of blood. There was none. There wasn't even any coming out of his wounds. It was such an oddly clean crime scene. Suspicion fell on Price, Zaborski, and Ward. They were later charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence, as it seemed they were not fully cooperating with the investigation. And during the trial, the defense maintained their innocence, though, arguing that Wan's death was indeed caused by some unknown intruder. In 2010, the 3 housemates were acquitted of the criminal charges. The judge noted that the prosecution had failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that's a pretty infuriating way for the case to end, because obviously these 3 housemates had something to do with Wan's death. But what was the motive? That's the question. Next is the case of the Setagaya family. On the night of December 30th, 2000, in the Setagaya ward of Tokyo, the Miyazawa family, composed of Mikio Miyazawa, his wife Yasuko Miyazawa, their daughter Nina, and son Rei, died in their own home at the hands of an unknown assailant. The crime was discovered on New Year's Day when a neighbor noticed bloodstains in the window of the Miyazawa residence and contacted the police. Authorities would find the lifeless bodies of the Miyazawa family, and it had been a pretty gruesome scene. All 4 family members had been bound, beaten, and stabbed to death. And the assailant stuck around for a while after committing the act. He ate some of their food, he cruised the internet for a bit, and left without taking any valuable items. Whoever this person was, they're still out there, unless they've died since. And it's frustrating because there was so much evidence at the scene. There was DNA and fingerprints everywhere, but somehow the perpetrator has never been identified. Alright, the Brandon Swanson case. This is yet again a completely baffling case. In southwestern Minnesota, in May of 2008, Brandon Swanson, a college student, suddenly went missing. On the night of May 14th, Brandon was driving home from a party. At some point he got lost and then got his car stuck in a ditch. He phoned up his father trying to give him his whereabouts. His parents drove to his whereabouts and tried flashing their headlights, but Brandon said he didn't see them. So he told his dad, you know what, I'm just going to walk to a nearby town to get some help. He could see lights in the distance that he believed was the nearby town of Lind. Dad then stayed on the phone with him as he walked towards the town. At some point during the call though, Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh sh," and then went silent. They tried to call Brandon again, thinking the call had just disconnected, but they couldn't reach him. He hasn't been seen or heard from since. Next, we have the Florence salon case. On a cool November morning in 2001 in Florence, Montana, a customer arrived at the hair gallery salon for a scheduled appointment. What they found was the scene of a deadly crime. 3 women were dead, including Dorothy Harris, the owner of the salon, Brenda Patch, a manicurist, and Cynthia Paulus, a customer. Their throats had all been slit. Once again, there was nothing to go off here. No witnesses, no clear motive or suspect, just 3 innocent women whose lives were taken seemingly at complete random. The case of Lori Deppes. Lori Deppes, a 20-year-old woman, disappeared on August 19th of 1992 from Menasha, Wisconsin. On the night of her disappearance, Lori had been working at a local photography studio and was last seen leaving her shift. She had plans to meet her boyfriend at his apartment later that evening, but never arrived. Well, she'd made it into the parking lot, but never physically into the building. People inside the apartment heard her drive up, they heard her car door shut, but that was it. She never came in. Her car was found in the parking lot of the apartment complex. A styrofoam cup of soda was on top of it, but no sign of Lori. And she's never been found. I can't imagine how completely devastating this would be and confusing, just awful. We always think of, if my loved one is, heaven forbid, goes missing, they'll probably be when I'm not around. They'll probably be somewhere off alone. But the fact that she was right there outside the apartment, like car in the parking lot, they heard her getting out of the car and then just poof, gone. Has to be absolutely maddening. Finally though, we have the infamous Yuba County 5 case. This is one of the most mysterious cases in the United States. 5 young men in Yuba County, California disappeared in 1978. Theodore Weir, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Matthias were a group of friends, all with intellectual disabilities of some kind. They disappeared after attending a college basketball game. After the game, the men were last seen at a convenience store. They had plans to return home to Yuba County, but they never made it back. Their abandoned car was later found in a remote and mountainous area called Plumas National Forest. The car was stuck in the snow and there was no sign of the men. It was determined that they'd walked away from the car, even though the weather was very harsh. In June of 1978, there was finally a breakthrough in the case. The remains of Ted were discovered in a trailer about 19 miles from where the car had been found. There was food and supplies in the trailer, where it had seemingly died of starvation and exposure. This was very odd because the trailer was stocked with enough food to keep all 5 men alive for quite a while, and there was stuff there to make fire and everything, but none of that had been used. Then Jack and Bill were found the following day, about 11 miles from the car. And all that was left of Bill were bones, and Jack looked to have been partially eaten by an animal. Jackie's remains were found 2 days later, and as for Gary, he was never found. So what went on here? Why did they leave so far from the car and try and stay in this trailer? Why didn't they eat the food that was there? We'll likely never know.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the seahorse birth. Speaking of animals giving birth in strange ways, let's talk about the reasons why you should never Google a seahorse giving birth. I can't be the only one who is highly uncomfortable by the sight, but I'm not entirely sure why I don't like it. Seahorses are pretty cool, they're pretty cute, and generally I personally don't have a problem with them. That is, until they start shooting out kids by the dozen. There aren't many birthing processes that look like it's a fun, nice time, but this one really just looks stressful. An interesting thing about seahorse reproduction is that the males of this species are actually responsible for carrying the children. Seahorse fathers incubate their developing embryos in a pouch located on their tail. Their tail basically serves as the equivalent of a female uterus seen in mammals. When birthing time rolls around, these fathers are giving birth by basically shooting these babies out of the tail, but there's thousands of them. It looks like the seahorse is having contractions or maybe something similar. Definitely not a scientist, but with every contraction, thousands of tiny little baby seahorses pop out, and while the miracle of life is a beautiful process, it also leaves me feeling really uncomfortable. Super happy for the new dad and all, just don't want to be flooded with seahorse birthing videos, personally. In our number 5 spot today, we have epidermolysis bullosa. With every part of this series, I learn about one more thing I didn't know I needed to be afraid of, and this is one of those things. This skin condition is quite a rare one, and it is one that affects the skin. It causes the skin to be extremely fragile and often blistering. These blisters can occur from the simplest things like minor injuries, even from just rubbing or scratching. There are even some more severe cases where this blistering can occur inside of the body, like on the inside of the mouth or even the inside of the stomach, which sounds so awful. This is something that is inherited, and while you normally can tell soon after birth, sometimes symptoms don't present themselves until teenage or young adult years. Symptoms include things like fragile skin that blisters easily, especially on the palms and feet, nails that are thick or unformed, scalp blistering and hair loss, skin that looks thin, and dental problems such as tooth decay. Unfortunately, there is not a cure for this skin condition, and treatment just focuses on healing present blisters and trying to prevent new ones. All in all, this sounds like a really painful thing for those who have to deal with it, and googling this term will have some really graphic and sometimes even gory photos coming up, which is exactly why it's a term that is best to stay away from when it comes to the search bar. Being informed is great. Seeing horrifying images, well, less great, for sure. In our number 4 spot today, we have the wandering black hole. The James Webb Telescope is one of the most exciting space tools of all time, and it has already revealed some incredible information and photos to us in its debut year. But in order to fully feel how incredible these things are, we have to remember where we came from. The James Webb was preceded by the infamous Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble walked so James Webb could run. Since its launch into low Earth orbit in the 1990s, this space telescope has been delivering us amazing space discoveries, and this one is a bit of a frightening one. Back in 2017, the Hubble located a black hole, which is already frightening, but this one was peculiar. That is because they found out that this one was being pulled or manipulated by gravitational waves. Basically what this means is that at some point, this black hole is going to escape its own galaxy and begin roaming the universe. Black holes are bad enough. I don't want them to start wandering around. Turns out, however, that this really is a possibility, and it's happened in more than this one instance. Googling these wandering black holes is sure to send anyone into a doomsday spin. The good news, however, is that despite this black hole weighing approximately the same as 1 billion suns as it flies through space at 5 million miles per hour, it's estimated to be about 8 billion light years from Earth, so at this point, we're pretty safe. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Amazonian giant centipede. These centipedes are the largest centipede species in the world, with the ability to grow over a foot. These gross things will prey on basically anything they can, which includes other large insects, spiders, millipedes, scorpions, even tarantulas. But because they're so huge, it also includes small lizards, frogs, snakes, mice, and even bats. They have crazy hunting techniques for the largest of their prey, and have been known to climb on the ceiling of caves in order to get the bats, which is both incredible and very scary. These things are also venomous, and while it hasn't been a common occurrence for humans to die from a bite, there is one recorded incident that took place in 2014. This incident happened in Venezuela, and a person passed away after being bitten by one of these giant centipedes after it had hidden itself in an empty soda can. There are a lot of dangerous things crawling around on the forest floor of the Amazon, but this one might take the cake on the most disgusting looking. In our number 2 spot today, we have invisible fire. A lot of these horrible searches are horrible because of the images that the search will reveal, but for this one, the issue with it is the fact that you can't see it. Invisible fires are actually ethanol fires. These are the fires that are created by alcohol, even the kinds we drink, and motor fuel as well, which is why they can be quite an issue for race car drivers and crews. Ethanol burns blue and smokeless, but these blue flames can be virtually invisible to the naked eye. This provides an incredibly huge obstacle, obviously. We now know how dangerous and deadly fires can be, so how do we fight something that is dangerous and deadly but that we can't see? It truly is one of those things that upon learning about, I suddenly developed some sort of an irrational fear over it. And that one scene in Talladega Nights makes a lot more sense now. In our number 1 spot today, we have alien hand syndrome. If someone told me about this before I made this list, I would have thought that they were trying to play like a silly little trick on me, but this one really does exist. Alien hand syndrome is an eerie phenomenon that occurs when a person suddenly does not have control over their hand or any limb anymore. The hand will begin acting acting like it has a mind of its own, which truly is a terrifying thought. Sometimes people will find themselves in a situation where they're forced to keep the alien hand under control with a hand they thankfully still have control over, so as to ensure they don't harm themselves or anyone else. The most common factor regarding this syndrome is that the primary motor cortex, which controls the hand movement, is isolated from the premotor cortex influences, but it still remains intact and able to execute movements. All in all, this isn't like the deadliest one on this list, but it certainly is very, very creepy, and unless you want to be incredibly freaked out, I would potentially refrain from Googling it.
A Russian app called the Smart Voting app was removed from Google Play on September 17th of 2021. Smart Voting was an app created by Alexei Navalny, an anti-corruption activist, lawyer, and eventual political prisoner in Russia, who mysteriously died in 2024 while in prison on extremism charges. He and his team had created the app for Russian voters to pick candidates who had the best chance of defeating those backed by the ruling party, United Russia, which Alexei described as a party of, quote, crooks and thieves. The app was a strategy to consolidate the opposition vote. In September of 2021, though, right before the Russian parliamentary elections, the Russian government demanded that Google remove the Smart Voting app from its Play Store. They threatened Google with legal consequences and even arrests of local employees if they didn't comply. So, Google caved to their demands and removed the app from the Play Store. Now, a year before Navalny had come out with this app, he was hospitalized after being poisoned by a nerve agent. Then, after being imprisoned on highly suspicious embezzlement charges, the Russian prison service comes out saying that he died after taking a walk and complaining about feeling ill earlier in the morning. Highly suspicious indeed.
If you were to hop on Google Earth, type in 2207 Seymour Avenue, and then turn on Street View, you would be greeted with an image of a blurred house located on a seemingly unassuming street. But there's a reason behind Google's decision to restrict users from viewing the home, and that is because it once belonged to a very bad man named Ariel Castro, who between 2002 and 2004 plucked 3 young women from the roads of Ohio and imprisoned them in that very home until he was arrested in 2013. Castro's first victim, Michelle Knight, was taken on August 23rd of 2002. On April 21st of 2003, Castro took his second victim, Amanda Berry, and on April 2nd of 2004, he captured his fourth, Gina De Jesus. For over a decade, he tormented and violated all 3 of the women, and even impregnated one, all while he was pretending to aid in the search of his captives alongside his fellow neighbor. On May 6th of 2013, Amanda managed to escape Castro's home and contact the police. He was arrested that same day. Castro was charged with 4 counts of forcible confinement and 3 counts of violation. However, he pled guilty to 937 counts of violation, as well as aggravated killing, which I can't get into because of YouTube guidelines. For his crimes, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years without the possibility of parole, but he got off easy, as just 1 month into his life sentence, Castro took his own life inside of his prison cell.
Google Street View launched in 2007, and for just under a year, users were able to see a 360-degree view of various military bases throughout the United States, using this brand new feature. What a glorious 8 months it was. Then in March of 2008, the Pentagon crashed the party and had Google remove the images of the bases. I mean, some people might have thought this was shady, but I think it's completely understandable. I mean, they're military bases. Do you really want anyone from anywhere in the world to have the ability to scope these places out in detail from every angle, from the comfort of their own home? Yeah, it's a security risk, so they asked Google to take the images down. That doesn't mean I'm saying they're not hiding aliens in some of these places, though.
Hoping to get a quick glance at the Marcule nuclear site? Well, too bad, because it's restricted by Google per the request of the French government, which is fair. I mean, it is the top nuclear research facility in France. There is something different about the way the facility has been censored, though, in comparison to other locations on Google Maps. You see, instead of being blurred out like other military bases like the ones James just mentioned, or the former home of Ariel Castro, the nuclear site is pixelated for for some reason. Perhaps I'm reading into this, but the distinction is strange. Anyways, some not so fun facts about the Marcyl nuclear site. It exploded on Monday, September 12th of 2011. Well, part of it exploded anyway, specifically the furnace used to melt nuclear waste. The explosion caused the death of one man who was, and I quote, carbonized, which basically means his body was turned into charcoal. The explosion also caused serious injuries to 4 others, as well as a massive on-site fire. While the facility admitted that the explosion might have caused a low-level radiation leak, they assured the public that it was nothing to worry about. Okay. Sure. The reason for the explosion, however, was never revealed. But what is interesting about the tragedy is that it came just 1 week after the French president publicly knocked the anti-nuclear trend, which favors less unstable forms of energy above nuclear energy. I'm not saying that the two are related, but I'm not saying that they're not.
In 1969, Donald Henry Gaskins began ending the lives of a series of hitchhikers he picked up while driving around the coastal highways of the American South. He would then torment and mutilate his victims. He claimed to have ended the lives of 80 to 90 people, and he was arrested in 1975. When a criminal associate confessed to police that he'd witnessed Donald ending the life of 2 young men, he was convicted of 8 homicides and was sentenced to death, which was later commuted to life imprisonment without parole. Now in prison, Donald committed another homicide by ending the life of another prisoner. He's the only man to have ever ended the life of an inmate on death row. Next up, we have Dennis Nilsen. So many people call this guy the British Jeffrey Dahmer. Kind of gives you an idea of what we're working with here. This has to be one of the creepiest criminal cases that I've ever heard in recent history. When I first heard about what this guy did, there was a lot of tossing and turning in bed that night. So Nilsen ended the lives of 15 gay men in London between 78 and 83. He'd keep the bodies around for a while, propping them up and posing them around like life-size dolls before hiding them in the floorboards and eventually flushing the remains down the toilet when they'd become a little too gnarly to keep around. Yeah, he'd flush them down the toilet. So not only was this guy completely deranged, but also incredibly stupid. Folks in the building started complaining about this awful smell, and yeah, human flesh was discovered in his sewage system. Dennis claimed he went into a trance, and on 7 occasions actually freed the men rather than ending their lives because he was able to snap out of it. But the majority of his victims weren't so lucky. At one point, Dennis was rapidly running out of storage space, with half a dozen bodies hidden around his apartment. He was forced to spray his rooms twice a day to try and get rid of the flies that were hatching from the decomposing bodies. When neighbors complained about the smell, he convinced them they stemmed from structural problems with the building. Dennis was convicted in 83 of 6 counts of homicide with 2 attempted homicides and was sentenced to life in prison. Still imprisoned at Full Sutton Maximum Security Prison in Yorkshire, England, without the chance of release. Emperor Domitian was the last Roman emperor of the Flavian dynasty, and he ruled the empire for 15 years following the death of his brother Titus in 81 AD. Domitian didn't really care about his citizens at all. He was a self-indulgent man with a thirst for violence. He spent much of his time committing adultery with prostitutes, and he was also addicted to watching gladiatorial fights between women and dwarfs. But Domitian is best known for his reign of terror. After taking power away from the Senate, he became increasingly paranoid about the upper classes of Rome, as he suspected them of plotting against him. Domitian oversaw the death sentences of philosophers, senators, imperial officers, and intellectuals. He even sentenced his own cousin to death at one point. How nice. Now, since he was so paranoid, he wanted his spies to show no mercy. Under the emperor's instructions, they would chop off hands and burn genitalia in order to extract as much information as possible from their prisoners. After 3 years of slaughter, Domitian died at the hands of a Praetorian guard, and the senators of Rome did their utmost to erase his name from history. And finally, we have Pedro Rodrigues Filho. Pedro Rodrigues Filho is a Brazilian serial slayer. He was arrested in 1973 and was later convicted in 2003 for ending the lives of at least 71 people. and sentenced to 128 years in prison. Committing his first homicide at the age of 14, Pedro began a series of burglaries and carried out a death spree against local criminals. By the age of 18, he'd ended the lives of 10 people. While in prison, he took the life of his own father, who was also serving time for homicide. Pedro even went on to end the lives of at least 47 inmates while in prison. His continued spree led to further convictions, increasing his sentence to 400 years. But he was later released from prison in 2007 after serving 34 years. Then he was rearrested in 2011. Following his second release in 2018, he started a YouTube channel called Pedrojino Ex Matador, commenting on modern crimes, campaigning against gang violence, and teaching the public not to be proud of criminal acts. But on March 5th of 2023, he was shot and died of his injuries.
This list, in our number 10 spot, we have Chordodes formosanus. Sure. This is the scientific name for a kind of horsehair worm that has its sights set on the praying mantis. This little parasite, well, not little at all actually, is a type that will pass through a variety of different hosts through its life stages. They start out their life in the guts of small insects that the praying mantis would feed on. From there, once the mantis is nice and infected, these disgusting creatures begin to grow. When the worm is sufficiently mature, it takes control over the insect's body and directs them to a body of water and gets them to jump in, which allows this horrifying thing to swim out. These worms can grow up to 90 centimeters long, which is disgusting, and they are super dangerous to the mantis. That is because when it breaks free in order to go and reproduce itself, it leaves behind a half-empty mantis husk. A search of these guys will have videos and images of these guys coming up, including people dunking praying mantises into water and watching these wiggly guys escape. It honestly made me feel sick to my stomach, so I can't even imagine how the mantis feels. In our number 9 spot today, we have blank room soup. If you've been on the internet for a while, chances are you've probably seen this video floating around. This entire thing really is just the stuff of nightmares. Basically, the video is set in a blank room and it features a man eating some kind of soup. The soup eater has his face censored and it sounds like he is crying while eating this soup, and this is all creepy enough, but there is another totally freaky thing in this video. Basically, there's a guy in dark clothing with a mascot head on who is rubbing this guy's back as he eats the soup. Soon, another guy wearing an identical outfit comes in and does the exact same thing. I realize this sounds very strange as I'm explaining it, but it truly is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. For years, rumors swirled about this video, some saying it originated on the dark web, and the guy eating soup was being held against his will, and the soup was made out of his own wife. How horrible is that? While we may have a far less sinister answer as to where this video came from, it truly still is chilling to watch. In our number 8 spot today, we have vent worms under a microscope. This one is so random, I'm not even sure why you would be googling it, but if I'm being honest, you're definitely better off just not doing that. Hydrothermal vents live on the ocean floor and they are the result of tectonic activity. Through this tectonic activity, as seawater seeps downward through the oceanic crust, it gets really hot and becomes very rich in chemicals. This leads to the water becoming so buoyant that it comes back out of the surface of the sea floor, and that is what is called a hydrothermal vent. The water coming out of the vent is that same super hot, super chemically rich water, and it is an extremely important part of underwater ecosystems. The water from the vent is highly acidic and hot, while the water in the depths of the ocean is slightly basic and freezing cold. There are many different smaller species who come to the vent areas because of the chemicals in the water, as well as the heat, which helps certain types of food sources grow, which they then want to consume. One of these creatures is aptly named the vent worm. These guys are super tiny and they can't really be seen with the naked eye, and we should consider ourselves lucky for that because of what they look like under a microscope. These creatures are fully nightmare inducing with creepy hook-like teeth. I'm just glad they aren't an everyday occurrence in the ocean, cause I would never go swimming again. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Australian paralysis tick. Ticks are considered ectoparasites since they wreak havoc on their host from the outside of the body, while most other parasites need to be inside the body. There are, of course, different kinds of ticks that can transmit diseases such as Lyme disease, but in these kinds of cases, the transmission of disease is not actually the tick's goal, which is why today we are talking specifically about the Australian paralysis tick. tick. These ticks purposefully secrete a neurotoxin that causes paralysis. Alright, definitely not good, but this can be especially dangerous depending on the different areas that the tick paralyzes, because it has the ability to paralyze something like the lungs, which of course would be a very bad situation. The good news is that once the tick is removed, the effects of the toxin should wear off completely. I thought when I get the chance to go to Australia, my only worries would be the snakes and the spiders, but I guess I'll just add this tick to the list. Safe to say these creepy crawlies are just one Google search away from sending you down a rabbit hole of the disgusting. In our number 6 spot today we have Vandellia serosa. Vandellia serosa is a very tiny eel-like parasitic fish. Yeah, I guess this is just a parasite list now. This is what happened. I googled one of these guys and then went on a spree. That's why I'm warning you against it. These guys feed on other fish by swimming into their gills, where they then began drinking their blood, which gave them the nickname vampire fish. Vampire fish can also enter the human body through any orifice it finds. Okay, and it will drink human blood as well. They have backwards facing spines, so they will lodge themselves wherever they enter the body. After filling up on their tasty meal, they usually end up passing away there, but they are bloated from eating so much. This means that surgery will be required in order to remove it, and depending on where it ended up, this surgery has varying degrees of difficulty, if you get what I'm saying. Orifices, surgery, it's not good. In our number 5 spot today we have the hagfish. There are about 76 different species of hagfish, and some of them are known to live as deep as 5,500 feet below the surface of the ocean. While hagfish isn't particularly the best name in the world, they are also known by the equally disgusting name of slime eels. These creatures definitely are pretty horrendous to look at, no offense to them. Rather than a mouth with a jaw, these strange looking creatures instead just have a ring of razor sharp teeth. Really love it. They use these teeth to burrow into the flesh of dead whales on the seafloor, and once inside, they then basically just stay there and eat their way from the inside out. That is all horrible enough, but what's worse is how they got their slimy nicknames. Basically, their body produces a sort of goop that is used to ward off predators. If they are stuck in the clutches of a terrifying predator, they release what is described as, quote, copious amounts of this slimy goop that is designed to clog the mouth or gills of said predator, which will hopefully have them releasing these little devils. Aside from this defense mechanism, if their slime doesn't work and they find themselves still caught in the grasp of a predator, they can sort of tie themselves into a knot in order to hopefully escape the clutches. All in all, a creepy, slithery little slimy creature with a ring of razors for a mouth, it's just a thing I personally would rather not search up on the web.
Coming in at number 5 is an island of dolls. One doll is enough to creep me out, but did you know that there is actually an island of dolls? Oh yes, you heard that right. It's quite literally the thing of nightmares. Located in Mexico, this island has a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the world. And while that description often gets thrown around, to be honest, I kind of believe it with this one. I mean, it's an island of dolls. It makes perfect sense to me. Legend has it that a young girl died from drowning here, and when a man named Julian Barrera moved to the island, he found he was being tormented by the girl's restless spirit. In an attempt to please her, he began hanging dolls across the island. But it seems the dolls weren't enough to please the spirit, as she managed to rope Julian into convincing his nephew that she needed a friend to join her in the afterlife. The poor nephew's body was found in a nearby canal at the very same spot where the girl had died years prior. It's said that all the dolls that remain are alive, likely haunted by the spirits of the ones who lost their lives here. Some say that their eyes move and watch them as they walk across it, but even creepier is the claim that it's not just their eyes but also their hands that move. Plus, apparently the dolls are known to laugh and whisper behind your back as you walk past. To summarize, this will not be my next tourist destination. Coming in at number 4 is Mercy. So maybe it's just me, but the fact that Mercy is one of the cuter haunted dolls I have ever seen almost makes me more afraid of her. Kind of like a cute tiny little creature that lowers your guard with its giant beanie baby eyes so that you get close enough for it to kill you with its lethal venom. Anyways, the story with Mercy is that the current owner purchased Mercy off of eBay, and as we know, that almost never goes well. When she was buying her, it was said Mercy was haunted by the spirit of a young girl, but according to the owner, that couldn't be further from the truth. Don't get it twisted, the doll's for sure haunted, but the owner is certain it's something much worse, something evil, maybe even demonic. As soon as Mercy was brought into her home, weird things started happening. The owner felt immediately uneasy around the doll and knew that something bad was living inside of it. Then, just a few days later, she noticed that radio stations began changing if Mercy was near them. But creepiest of all was when she caught the doll standing on both feet in the middle of the room after she had been stored away in a chest. I mean, can you imagine walking in on that? I honestly might move. I know that sounds dramatic, but that house belongs to the demon inside the doll now. I may as well just get out alive while I still can. Coming in at number 3 is Harold. Haunted dolls are a pretty huge thing on the internet, I have come to understand. Personally, I have a hard time understanding why you would want to bring a possessed doll into your home, but hey, to each their own, right? Apparently, the whole sensation of it all started back in 2003 with a haunted doll named Harold. Now, what's weird about this one is that allegedly, after the new owner, Anthony, acquired the doll, the lister on eBay came forward admitting that it was all a hoax and that Harold wasn't actually haunted. But Anthony would beg to differ. Apparently, as soon as the doll arrived, strange things began happening. There were swarms of flies surrounding his attic, objects moving all around, and his dog even died, completely out of the blue. He even asked his vet. There were no answers, no illnesses, no physical abnormalities, nothing. The dog just dropped dead. That's when Anthony really got frightened. Eventually, he has come to believe that there are 5 different entities living inside of Harold, one of which seems to be the malevolent leader, while the others are being held hostage by the more powerful evil force. Anthony claims he is constantly worried for his life, but the doll continues to live with him as he is unable to make it leave, and he feels it is his duty to figure out how to get the entities out of Harold once and for all. And seriously, save yourself and don't Google him. People that have reported feeling ill or even vomiting up blood after seeing his photo. In that breath, I really hope that doesn't happen to me. Coming in at number 2, Letta. So there are regular creepy porcelain or rag dolls, and then there are marionette dolls, which to me just add a whole other level of terrifying. And the most famous of these is the truly haunting Letta. Her owner Carrie says in his hometown there was an abandoned house that everyone believed was haunted. When he got older, he decided to visit his hometown and check it out for himself if the old house really was scary after all. When he got inside, he found his old historic marionette doll that had been hidden underneath some floorboards, and intrigued, Carrie decided to plop her into the car and take her home. On the drive home, he says the doll spoke to him crying out, "Letta me out," which he decided would be the perfect name, and so Letta was born. Once he brought her home, the people in his life warned him that they felt very uncomfortable around the doll and that they didn't trust it. But still, he decided to keep her. To this day, he still has her. He has even gone on to TV shows with the doll for interviews. Still, make no mistake, this doll is scary. Carrie himself admits things got strange very soon after he brought her home. Scuff marks were appearing on the floor, items were moving, and his little ones would complain about her being in their nightmares. In fact, one night they said they woke up to Letta talking and moving around all on her own. At one point, Carrie tried to sell the cursed doll, but as he tells it, he physically could not move her out of the car. So, moral of the story, maybe don't bring home a creepy doll you found under the floor in an old abandoned haunted house from your childhood. Yeah, do we all agree there? And last up in our number 1 spot today, the Susie doll. As the story goes, in 1983, Susie was given to a young girl named Heather Platt as a birthday present from her aunt Robin. The creepy doll was rough around the edges as she was homemade, but still Heather loved it. But that night, things took a dark turn when Heather's parents were woken up by the sound of growling and saw a dark shadow walk down the street and enter their home. From that day forward, the doll was never the same. Susie began moving things around the house and was often found in completely different spots than where she had last been placed. Things got creepier when they would find Heather sitting with Susie watching TV static in what appeared to be a trance. Next thing they knew, things turned violent as the family would wake up with perfect circles of their hair missing at the back, and medical tests proved that it had been pulled out. out. But of course, none of them had done anything. Susie began moving freely at a more frequent and alarming rate, never moving while she was being watched, but could change rooms at a moment's notice. Fast enough that by the time you turned around, she could literally be right in front of you. Then, after the father was attacked in the middle of the night by the demonic doll, they knew they had to get an expert. In came Lorraine Warren, who took one look at this whole situation and told them to seek out an exorcist immediately. Thankfully, the ritual was complete and the family decided to throw away the doll for good, and according to what I read, the family has never let another doll in their house ever again.
In 2003, Google decided to block a series of ads from the environmental group Oceana. The ads were targeting the cruise line Royal Caribbean for what Oceana saw as poor sewage treatment practices. But why did Google block these ads? Well, Google came out with a statement writing, "Google does not accept advertising if the ad or site advocates against other individuals, groups, or organizations." Oceana, of course, wasn't happy about this. They argued that their ads were factual and important for raising awareness about the environmental impact of cruise ships, and blasted Google for silencing their right to try and hold big companies accountable for pollution. As stated by Oceana's chief executive officer, Andrew Sharpless, "This is outrageous. For this company to claim to promote freedom of expression and yet deny us the right to effectively advocate against pollution is blatant hypocrisy." The question that leaves us with is why they chose to blunt our right to express ourselves, if not from cruise industry pressure.
There is no street view of North Centennial Island on Google Maps, and for good reason. Not only are we restricted from viewing the islands on Google, but Google is restricted from documenting the island itself, and that is because North Centennial Island is one of the most restricted islands in the whole entire world, and that is because it is inhabited by an uncontacted and highly protected and incredibly dangerous tribe of people. Uncontacted meaning that the natives of North Centennial have had quite literally no extended contact with the outside world. Incredibly dangerous meaning that if you get too close to the shores of the island, they will kill you, rip your body into pieces, and then bury those pieces in the sand. It's happened before. In 2018, an evangelical missionary named John Allen Chow attempted to share the word of God with the island's natives. He was last seen alive paddling a rowboat to shore. He was last seen altogether the following day by fishermen near the island who spotted Chow's limp body being dragged across the sand by the natives. I have to say, Google Maps leaving this island undocumented is not something I'm overly torn up about. No one gets paid enough for that kind of job.
In China, Google is barely usable. Almost everything is met with heavy restrictions. Google followed China's censorship rules until 2010, filtering out results the Chinese government didn't like. This was part of the Great Firewall, a series of strict internet regulations enforced by the People's Republic of China. Now, Google complied in order to avoid getting blocked altogether, as had happened back in 2002. They promised not to share user info with the government though, and let users know when content was restricted. In 2009, Google came under fire from the Chinese government for allowing search results with explicit content and was ordered to block certain overseas websites. In January of 2010, after a cyber attack targeting Chinese descendants, Google announced that they were going to stop censoring results on China's version of Google. By March 2010, Google redirected Chinese Google users to Google Hong Kong, where search results were uncensored. But China's Great Firewall still blocked certain terms. Then in 2018, it was revealed that Google was now working on a new censored search engine for China called Project Dragonfly. This was a highly controversial project that led a number of Google employees to quit. The project has apparently been terminated, but Google is still highly filtered in the country.
Another thing you won't be able to find on Google: classified Pentagon documents leaked by 21-year-old National Guardsman Jack Teixeira, who not only stole these classified and highly sensitive documents from the Pentagon, but also posted said documents online on Discord, which is an instant messaging social media platform that allows for text messaging, video and voice calls, and mixed media sharing. The documents shared by Teixeira contained a mix of tactical statistics and battlefield maps drafted by the Pentagon staff. Statistics and maps that relate to current ongoing global conflicts. Big no-no. The whole thing is insane, and it's really baffling that a 21-year-old could have done this, but according to the government, Jack Teixeira is guilty, and will be spending the next 16 years of his life in federal prison, following a debrief with the Defense and the Justice Department of the United States, during which time he will likely be interrogated and forced to return whatever sensitive materials he might still have in his possession. While some images of the leaked documents do remain online, most of them have now been restricted by Google per the request of the United States government, which makes sense. They were plans about what they were going to do in regards to an ongoing conflict. That's not something you want circulating the internet. Or is it?
So this should be obvious, but you won't find anything from the dark web using Google, which is totally fair. The dark web is the dark underbelly of the internet that many of us just have no desire to explore. We've all heard the legends, though, about all the stuff you can buy, which is pretty much everything. You can buy illicit substances, weapons, people. You can hire people to kill other people. It's just not a very fun place. And that's all I gotta say about that.
Alright, we've talked about what you cannot Google. Now let's discuss what you should not Google, especially when your name is Brian Walsh and you've just killed your wife. Let's get into this man's search history. How long before a body starts to smell? How to stop a body from decomposing. How to embalm a body. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. How long for someone to be missing to inherit. Can you throw away body parts? What does formaldehyde do? How long does DNA last? Can identification be made on partial remains? I'm not done. Dismemberment and best ways to dispose of a body. How to clean BLOOD from a wooden floor. Luminol to detect BLOOD. What happens when you put body parts in ammonia? Is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? Hacksaw. Can you be charged for killing without a body? And can you identify a body with broken teeth? Yeah, he really searched up all of those things. But to make matters even worse, Walsh made every single one of those searches on his son's iPad. Now, the Brian Walsh case is actually an ongoing case. His wife Anna was killed in 2003, so unfortunately I cannot yet say that Brian has been thrown into a cell and that the guards have thrown away the key, but I've got a pretty good feeling we all know how this trial is going to end.
Starting us off at number 10 is a massive pentagram. In an isolated corner of Kazakhstan lies a dark symbol measuring roughly 1,200 feet that appears to have been literally carved right into the Earth's surface. Although you might not be able to fully see the entire symbol at ground level, from above, the stark pentagram is clear as day. Conspiracy theorists have linked the cliffside pentagram to the Freemasons and Wiccans, believing that it is a site of animal sacrifice and satanic ritual, although this has never actually been totally confirmed. But I will admit, it is a bit mysterious. Apparently, there are almost no other signs of human habitation in the area, plus, you know, a giant pentagram etched into the Earth's surface isn't something you see every day, nor is it usually a great sign. So whether it is a cursed geoglyph from Satan worshippers or not, maybe it's just better to play it safe and steer clear. Coming in at number 9, a hill of crosses. Found on top of a hill in northern Lithuania is a site that, depending on your own personal beliefs, could either be considered a thing of beauty or one of the most strange things in the world. The Hill of Crosses began popping up back in 1831 following the Polish-Russian uprising, and over the years it has grown to host nearly 100,000 crosses, crucifixes, rosaries, and religious carvings. As generations pass and the collection grows, the place has come to signify the peaceful endurance of Lithuanian people despite the threats they face throughout history. Now, that part is lovely, I can't deny. But also, I know I'm not alone in seeing a hill filled with an overflowing amount of religious symbols and feeling a little uneasy. Since, you know, usually that many in one place is to ward off some kind of evil. That being said, maybe it really is nothing but a beautiful display and a symbol of their endurance. But are you willing to go and find out yourself? Coming in at number 8, Nagoro. A teeny little rural village in the Aya Valley region of Japan. What makes this seemingly cute and quaint town a mysterious and creepy attraction is that it is famous for being filled with upwards of 350 life-sized dolls. Now, I don't know about you, but there are few things I find more terrifying than creepy dolls, and it's only made creepier when you find out that the entire village is only made up of about 27 residents. Apparently in the early 2000s, Tsukimi Ayano, who'd moved away from the area when she was young, moved back once her father fell ill, and as a gift for him, she made her first doll in his likeness and placed it in a field. And since that day, she has made more than 400. But she isn't alone in this endeavor. Inspired by the initial doll for her father, many residents in the village followed in her footsteps and began making their own life-size dolls in their likeness or for their loved ones. And soon enough, even the school was joining in on the trend. Sadly, the school closed in 2012 due to the decreasing population. However, the dolls remain scattered across the village, growing in numbers as the years go by. I mean, visit it at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you about a village filled with 400 creepy dolls. Coming in at number 7, the Parikala Sculpture Park. Similarly to the Village of Dolls, this garden was created by a self-taught recluse artist named Viho Ronkonen, and this exhibit is definitely one of the more haunting things I have come across. Born in 1944, Ronkonen began working at a nearby paper mill at the age of 16. And as the story goes, he used his first paycheck to buy apple seedlings and a bag of concrete. And so his eerie sculpture garden began. For the next 50 years, he continued to add to his collection. So much so that by the time he passed away in 2010, there were 550 completed concrete sculptures adorning his property. However, these statues are very, interesting, often placed in extremely odd positions. For example, one of the most strange parts is the 225 naked yogi section. However, they are not the only ones that give off a creepy vibe. Some of the statues sport human teeth, which makes me feel very worried about where he found those, while others were created with a speaker placed inside them that omits incomprehensible sounds. I mean, top to bottom, it's just all a very strange little place. Coming in at number 6 is Snake Island. Found off the coast of Brazil in the Atlantic Ocean, is an island that I am warning you now to never visit. Quite literally, the place of nightmares, this island is home to the critically endangered golden lancehead pit viper, who became trapped on the island thousands of years ago at the end of the last ice age. Apparently, as the ocean levels were rising due to the melting ice, this island became disconnected from the mainland, which in turn forced the snakes to adapt to a new environment, eventually increasing their population to such a high degree that the island was rendered entirely too dangerous for public visitation. Now, I bet you're wondering, there are tons of venomous snakes everywhere. Why is this place so different? Well, for starters, it is pretty small as far as islands go, measuring only about 106 acres, but it's also home to upwards of 4,000 snakes, each weaponized with a venom so deadly that it can actually melt human flesh. In case you're wondering, that is roughly 1 snake per square meter, or 10 feet. So with that many snakes trapped on an island that small, there is pretty much nowhere you can escape from them.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the Wandering Black Hole. The Hubble Space Telescope is one of the most important scientific creations of all time. The Hubble walked so James Webb could run. Since its launch into low Earth orbit in the 1990s, this space has been delivering us amazing space discoveries, and this one is a bit of a frightening one. Back in 2017, the Hubble located a black hole, which is already frightening, but this one was peculiar. That is because they found that this one was being pulled or manipulated by gravitational waves. Basically, what this means is that at some point, this black hole is going to escape its own galaxy and begin roaming around the universe. Black holes are bad enough, I don't want them to start wandering around. The good news, however, is that despite this black hole weighing approximately the same as 1 billion suns as it flies through space at 5 million miles per hour, it's estimated to be about 8 billion light years away from Earth, so we're pretty safe at this point. But here's the thing, if we found one, it is very likely that there are many more out there. One search of this wandering black hole and you are going down a space rabbit hole of only the most terrifying things. In our number 3 spot today we have the Rat King. I would have thought that this was just the male antagonist in the Nutcracker, but turns out it is far, far worse. Rats are pretty freaky to many people for a variety of reasons, but the image of this one is even worse than just a single standalone rat. Basically, the term Rat King refers to a large group of rats that all have their tails tied together at the end. It is indeed a rare occurrence, and the tails could be stuck together for a variety of reasons. Whether it's because the hair got entangled together, there's some sort of sticky substance holding them together, or just, you know, a regular old knot. Whatever the case is, a Google search of this term will only have images coming up, and it truly is unsettling to see. It's obviously sad because no one wants to see an animal in a tricky situation, but also, it's rats. Rats are creepy. A bunch of rats all tied together is extra creepy. The reports of these rat kings mainly come from European countries, and although the existence of this phenomena is for some reason debated due to the limited evidence of its natural occurrence, there are still plenty of terrifying image results any search will yield. In our number 2 spot today we have a pilot's view in a storm. Taylor and I were on a plane this week, a few actually, so when I found out about this via watching a video, I was thankful I hadn't seen it before our flight. The view for a pilot has got to be pretty great for a lot of the job. Flying over beautiful places with incredible sights, that sounds amazing. And you know, pilots have only the best eyesight, so they're seeing it all super well. Flying at night, however, well, for pilots, I'm sure it's totally fine and normal, but when the average passenger catches a glimpse of what they are seeing, especially when the weather isn't exactly being kind, well, it was definitely enough to totally freak me out. A Google search of what a pilot sees when flying at night through a snowstorm isn't exactly a comforting sight. In fact, it's absolutely terrifying. It looks like we're traveling to another universe, not just barreling through our skies. I of course trust the pilots who have the training and the expertise, but it's just very unnerving to know what they are seeing while I'm just passed out with my neck pillow, you know? In our number 1 spot today we have the hairy frog. Last time we talked about some weird frogs, today we've got another kind. This frog isn't poisonous, it isn't growing eggs out of its back. These frogs simply just are hairy, and it is so unsettling. The Central African Trichobatetrachus robustus. These frogs, they're often referred to as the hairy frog or the horror frog, which I really agree with. These frogs have the unusual feature of having a thick mane of hair that is seen on their flanks and hind legs in the males of the species. According to experts, many believe that this feature is useful to the frogs because it could help them to stay underwater for longer periods of time. This proves to be extremely useful when they are tasked with guarding the female's eggs. This isn't the only weird feature of these frogs, however. Unfortunately, frogs also have claws. These bones burst through the toes of their hind legs, and it is said that they are used in quote interspecific combat. This has all led to these guys receiving the nickname Wolverine frog, which I honestly think is the most apt. Maybe they'll make an appearance in Deadpool 3. Who knows?
Starting us off at number 10 is Lily. One day, a group of paranormal researchers received a doll with a note attached to her saying, quote, "I found her outside my door one morning with a note that said to not put her in front of mirrors or in the same room I sleep in. I gave her a flashlight so she could drain the batteries, but instead she made my lights flicker at night. My cat would not go near her and my dog would just stare. At times I would be woken up from a dead sleep smelling burnt toast or sometimes a sweet fruity smell. Her favorite color is red. That is all I know." The researchers were very intrigued by the doll, and it didn't take long before Lily began acting strange around them too, and they knew that something was deeply wrong. But unlike what any sane person might do, like, I don't know, get rid of the evil and creepy doll, they decided to mass produce it using the original as a template. That's right, if you so choose, you can have your very own Lily doll delivered right to your door. I mean, I can't. According to the researchers, she is meant to ward off evil, so at least they had good intentions, or so they say. To me, it just feels like you're taunting the evil spirits to come your way, and I will not be partaking in any kind of hangout with this doll. Next up at number 9 is a doll's house. One of the last things I would ever want to live in my house would be a haunted evil doll. But apparently not everyone has has the same dreams. In fact, for the Watkins family, one wasn't enough. Instead, they have opted for a whole horde of possessed dolls to share their home with. The couple are both paranormal investigators and have been collecting cursed dolls for years. In their collection is Crystal, True, Monica, Charla, Isaac, Lily, Ashley, and Cameron, all of which were individually bought and all of which were advertised as being haunted. The community of dolls resides in their home in Pennsylvania, and up until 2015, the investigators actually set up a 24-hour live stream so that all of the internet could sit back and watch their cursed magic happen. Over the years, many claim to have witnessed more than one unsettling sight, but most notably was the 2009 sighting of a ghostly apparition of what appeared to be a boy. Okay, so maybe it's not the scariest of the bunch, but it is still a room full of possessed dolls, so it's a no for me. Coming in at number 8 is Amelia. Maybe one of the oldest haunted dolls still in existence, Amelia has been giving people nightmares for over 100 years. Back in the 1800s, she was gifted to the King of Italy, and from what I've been able to find, she wasn't yet haunted when under possession of the king. When the king died, he passed on the doll to one of his closest and dearest friends, Ulvado Bellina, who tragically, however, was assassinated, and so the doll passed down to his daughter, Marie. But still, the doll remained as sweet and unhaunted as ever. That was, of course, until the World Wars. Although she managed to get through World War I relatively unscathed, as the story goes, in World War II, there was a huge explosion and a woman dove into the chaos to try and save the doll for young Marie. Sadly, the woman trying to help lost her life, and to this day it's believed that her soul is the one that haunts the doll. Now missing both arms and a good portion of her scalp, it's said Amelia routinely opens and closes her eyes and is often heard crying out for her mother at night. What makes the last bit extra creepy is that the original voice box of the doll no longer works. In fact, it hasn't worked for years. But still, every night, her cries ring loud and clear for all to hear. Next up at number 7 is Amanda. Unlike many of the others on this list, Amanda is a bisque doll. What that means is that she's made of unglazed porcelain, and while in her time she may have been used as a toy, ultimately they have turned into collector's items for the affluent. Truthfully, Amanda's specific origin story is unknown. However, we do know that she first came into the limelight after being purchased off of good old eBay. The original purchaser of the evil doll didn't last long, as they said she brought bad luck into their lives. They sold it once more, and the next owner complained of the same issue. All in all, she has been sold and purchased 10 times, never lasting long in any of the homes she finds herself in. On top of bad luck, owners have complained that she moves around all on her own, often being found in places where there was no explanation for her being there. Creepiest of all comes from her current owner, who, despite knowing the rumors surrounding the doll, decided to go ahead and bring her into their home. At least they had the knowledge to store her inside a glass case. Except now, every night when it's dark and quiet, Amanda can be heard trying to scratch her way out of the glass. Where does she want to go exactly? Well, they have no idea, but let's just hope they don't open up that case to find out. Coming in at number 6 is Mandy. Back in 1991, the Quesnel District Museum received an anonymous donation in the form of a doll, which, I mean, from what I have learned, is never a good start. The donor informed them that she could no longer handle living with the doll due to her constant crying and relentless ability to move objects or even make them disappear, and that essentially she was just way too creeped out and starting to fear that her life was in danger. Allegedly, the museum contacted a psychic to see if the information they got from the donor was true, and as it turns out, it was. The psychic advised the museum to get rid of the doll, not to keep it, but they went against their advice and included it in their exhibit anyways. Soon, Mandy began haunting the halls of the museum. Visitors claimed to hear disembodied footsteps, the sound of tapping glass, and some even swear they witnessed her face change and her eyes blink. Even creepier is that when the museum decided to place Mandy alongside other dolls in the same case, the next day all the other dolls were either damaged or found tossed onto the floor in front of the case. They let her be alone after that. Just beware if you do decide to visit her, as allegedly anytime someone has tried to photograph her, their camera breaks. Coming in at number 5, Hashima Island. At one point in time, this small island off the coast of Nagasaki was a huge mecca for undersea coal mining. However, due to a number of atrocities committed during World War II, it now lies an abandoned island, void of all inhabitants, but filled with many ghosts from its past. It all started when the island was purchased by the Mitsubishi Group in 1890, and they began extracting coal from the undersea mines. By 1916, business was growing, and so they began building infrastructure to house the miners and their families, and over the next 50 years, the small island city continued to grow. However, it all started to go down south around 1930, when the company began pushing conscripted Korean civilians and Chinese prisoners of war into forced labor under very harsh and dangerous conditions paired with brutal treatment. Due to the labor conditions, an estimated 1,300 of these conscripted workers died on the island, either by underground accidents, malnutrition, or exhaustion. This treatment continued despite the rising death toll until the late 1960s, when the petroleum industry began turning coal essentially obsolete. Finally, by 1974, Mitsubishi closed the mine and the island was cleared indefinitely. Now a literal ghost town filled with decaying buildings to match, it's believed that all the souls who lost their lives remain haunting this city to this day. Coming in at number 4, the former Sansi UFO houses. When construction on these peculiar houses began in 1978, they were marketed to be vacation resorts for US military officers coming from their East Asian postings. But as you might notice, they have an extremely futuristic look to them, hence why they got the nickname UFO houses. However, the bubbly pod-like architecture wasn't the only strange thing about these houses. A mere 2 years after construction began, the project was abandoned and never finished due to several car accidents and a number of construction workers who took their own lives on the job. This of course caused a huge loss on the investment, and they were forced to end the project. The plan from there was to tear down all the buildings, despite a major public pushback, and eventually in 2010 all the UFO houses were demolished. But of course, this still didn't answer the mysterious question on everyone's mind. What was behind all this tragedy, and why were they so hell-bent on destroying the buildings? Well, there are a few theories. Some believe that the site was the former burial ground for Dutch soldiers, and that the workers had been cursed during construction, while another theory claims that the tragedies were due to the bisecting of the Chinese dragon sculpture located near the resort gates. And of course, the shape of the buildings drew in conspiracy theorists who claim aliens were the reason for death, and that they could have threatened the company to tear it down. To be honest, no one knows why it all happened, but it's still considered a haunted place, so you better steer clear just to be safe. Coming in at number 3 is Vaz Island. Way back in the 1920s, the Red Army began searching for a discreet place to build a military complex for inventing, producing, and testing biological weapons. They wanted something small and far away from the Soviet borders so as not to draw attention, and eventually by 1948, such a place was found. Almost immediately, a top-secret Soviet lab began testing agents such as smallpox, anthrax, and plague, among others. However, what they didn't see coming was that the island, once split between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, would begin to grow in size once the Aral Sea began drying up in the 1960s. Then fast forward to 1971, and a weaponized smallpox was accidentally released from the lab, infecting 10 people, 3 of whom lost their life. And by the 1990s, the secrecy of the lab got compromised, and all island inhabitants were evacuated, leaving the base completely abandoned by 1991. However, in their haste to leave, many of the containers were not properly destroyed or sealed, and so over time, these containers began to leak, contaminating the grounds for decades. Now, the good news is that by 2002, a lot of the sites were decontaminated, but many areas still remain contaminated, and it's still one of the most feared and deadly places in the world. Coming in at number 2, North Yungas Road. Also hauntingly referred to as Death Road, the Yungas Road is a 60-kilometer long stretch found in Bolivia that I would highly recommend you don't take your chances with. As you can imagine, you don't get the nickname Death Road without having a reputation that precedes you. The original road was built in the 1930s by the forced labor of Paraguayan prisoners, and up until a new route was built back in 2006, it was pretty much the only way to go from region to region. During this time, the route became notorious for its dangerous conditions and rising death toll, on average facing 209 accidents per year, 96 of which resulted in death. However, some years were worse than others. In July of 1983, a bus fell from the road into the canyon, killing more than 100 passengers. Then later, in the mid-90s, the road was averaging 1 victim per day. Even in 2011, there was a total of 114 accidents and 42 deaths. Nowadays, the death road is restricted to purely cyclists, and cars must now use the new route. However, that doesn't mean it's still not just about the most dangerous road in the entire world. And last up in our number 1 spot, Bikini Atoll. A tiny ring of small coral islands is located in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Bikini Atoll is a beautiful area with a dark and unfortunate backstory. You see, in the midst of World War II, after the nuclear attacks on Japanese soil took place, the American Army didn't waste much time before planning additional nuclear testing. Then in 1946, after deciding on the small area of Bikini Atoll, the military went ahead and forced the entire population to evacuate to neighboring islands so that they could carry out their nuclear testing. For the next 12 years, between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 23 nuclear devices at the site, including 20 hydrogen bombs, one of which was said to have been more than 1,000 times more powerful than the weapon dropped in Nagasaki, while another caused a giant tsunami, sinking several ships. Now, of course, there was not quite the same understanding of the lasting repercussions these tests would have. However, nearly a century later, and the island is still unfit for proper habitation due to the radiation and damage caused by these tests. So tragically, the residents that were promised to be relocated back to their home were never able to return. And if you ever get stranded there, you certainly won't last long.
Spot we have walking corpse syndrome. Cotard syndrome, also known as walking corpse syndrome, is a rare and severe mental illness that can cause a person to believe that they are dead or do not exist. Individuals with this disorder may also experience delusions of immortality or think that their internal organs have stopped functioning. Basically, those suffering from the syndrome can believe that they don't exist, that they are already dead, or that somehow they have lost all of their organs or other vital fluids. This syndrome can also occur alongside other mental health conditions such as depression, schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder. The causes of this syndrome are not really fully understood, but it is thought to result from abnormalities in brain function and also structure. The treatment for this syndrome typically involves a combination of medication and psychotherapy, and in some really severe cases, hospitalization might also be necessary. Googling this syndrome can definitely send you down a rabbit hole of terrifying things that our brains are capable of doing, and the scary things that they can convince us are real. In our number 9 spot today, we have spontaneous human combustion. Alright, spontaneous human combustion. Exactly what it sounds like. It is a phenomenon where a human body can seemingly suddenly burst into flames without an external source of ignition. Okay? Just add that to the list of things that you should just be terrified of, I guess. Despite numerous reports of such incidents throughout history, the scientific community remains pretty skeptical about the existence of this phenomenon, but there is some very interesting and horrifying evidence. Some theories suggest that certain chemical reactions within the body could lead to the ignition of flammable gases produced by the digestive system. Others believe that external factors such as cigarettes or alcohol consumption may have been involved in the reported cases. While spontaneous human combustion remains a mystery, it continues to fascinate and intrigue scientists and medical professionals and just the general public alike because it is a horrible thought. If it really does exist, it's basically just a game of waiting and hoping not. In our number 8 spot today, we have the sleeping sickness. Sleeping sickness, also known as African trypanosomiasis, is a parasitic disease caused by a protozoan parasite. It is transmitted to humans through the bite of the tsetse fly found in rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa. Symptoms of the disease include fever, headache, joint pain, and itching, followed by fatigue, confusion, and disturbed sleep patterns, which is what gives the disease its name. If left untreated, sleeping sickness can lead to severe severe neurological damage and even death. A diagnosis can actually be very difficult, but early detection and treatment with medication can thankfully cure the disease. Sleeping sickness actually remains a very significant public health problem in many parts of Africa, particularly in areas with limited access to healthcare. Of course, Googling this sickness will have images of the fly popping up, photos of infection sites, ill people who are currently dealing with the effects of the illness, and many other just very grim scenarios. All in all, this health problem is definitely one that people need to know about, so research into it can continue, but just be wary that your search might yield some unsettling results. In our number 7 spot today, we have hantavirus. We hear a lot about how rats and mice living among humans was the cause for the hasty spread of disease in time periods like the medieval, and thankfully it seems to be less of a problem now, but that doesn't mean the problem has simply ceased. Aside from stealing your food, there are still many viruses these pesky critters can spread, and one of those is hantavirus. The virus is found in their urine, droppings, and saliva, and it can be spread to people when they come into contact with contaminated surfaces or inhale the virus in the air. Symptoms of hantavirus infection can range from mild flu-like symptoms to more severe respiratory and kidney problems. There is no specific treatment or vaccine for hantavirus infection, and it can even be fatal in some cases. Okay? Prevention measures include controlling rodent populations, of course, avoiding contact with rodent excrement, which should just be a goal on a day-to-day, and taking precautions when cleaning areas with signs of rodent activity. If you've got a mouse problem, you might want to stop procrastinating that call to the exterminator. It might be more urgent than you once thought. In our number 6 spot today, we have anesthesia awareness. This is something you should definitely never Google if you're a person who already has anxiety surrounding surgery, or if you or anyone you know and love is getting surgery soon, okay? You don't want to hear about it. Anesthesia awareness, also known as unintended intraoperative awareness, is a rare but very distressing complication of general anesthesia. It occurs when a patient is aware of their surroundings in the surgical procedure being performed on them, despite being given medication to render them unconscious and unaware. Like, your body is asleep, but your mind is very, very awake. Anesthesia awareness can cause significant psychological trauma and may result in long-term mental health issues such as PTSD. Patients who experience this phenomenon may report feelings of panic, helplessness, and even pain during surgery. Although the incidence of anesthesia awareness is very low, estimated to occur in less than 1% of all surgeries, it remains a concern for both patients and healthcare providers. Various risk factors have been identified, such as the use of muscle relaxants, inadequate dosing of the anesthesia, and just different medical conditions. There are thankfully preventative measures in place to try and avoid this type of scenario, and you can absolutely chat with your doctor if you're worried about this sort of thing, but at the end of the day, just knowing about it is enough to give me chills. In our number 5 spot today, we have rabies. That's it. Okay, I feel like when I was a kid, we heard a lot about rabies for some reason, but now as an adult, we don't really talk about it very often. That's fine. I mean, I don't have a lot of reason to talk about rabies, but I don't think I ever realized how serious it actually is and how it affects people. And now that I've Googled it, I've gone down into the depths of the internet about rabies. Rabies is a viral disease that affects the nervous system of mammals, including humans, of course, and it is transmitted through the saliva of an infected animal, usually through a bite or a scratch. Once the virus enters the body, it travels to the brain and causes inflammation, which leads to a range of symptoms. These include fever, headache, muscle weakness. As the disease progresses, the person may experience more severe symptoms like hallucinations, seizures, and paralysis. Searching and learning more, seeing it in action, and all of that honestly is just terrifying. Rabies is very serious and is a potentially fatal disease if left untreated. It is preventable, thankfully, with the use of vaccines and proper medical care after exposure, but without access to these sorts of things, it can be extremely dangerous. To help avoid with problems like this, it's best to limit contact with wild animals, particularly bats, raccoons, skunks, and foxes, which are common carriers of the virus. So if you live in really any city in Canada, good luck, man. They're just all of them, just around. The radioactive man. After a fateful accident in Japan's Tokamura nuclear power plant in 1999, worker Hisashi Uchi suffered immensely when he arrived at the University of Tokyo hospital after being exposed to the highest level of radiation of any human in history, doctors were stunned. The nuclear power plant technician had almost zero white blood cells and thus no immune system. Soon he'd be crying blood as his skin melted. Kept in a special radiation ward to protect him from hospital-borne pathogens, the profuse amount of radiation coursing through his blood eradicated the introduced cells and skin grafts could not hold. "I can't take it anymore," he cried out, but at his family's insistence, the doctors continued their experimental treatments even as his skin began to melt from his body. Then on the 59th day in the hospital, he had a heart attack, but his family agreed that he should be resuscitated in case of death, so the doctors revived him. He'd eventually have 3 heart attacks in 1 hour. It was only a merciful final cardiac arrest due to multi-organ failure on December 21st, 1999 that released him from the pain. Now this was 83 days after the incident. I can't imagine the pain he was in and why the doctors and his family kept trying to save him. Next up, we have green boots. Climbing Mount Everest is a very dangerous thing to do, and unfortunately some people who have tried to do it have met their untimely death. As of November 2022, 310 people have died on Everest. Over 200 bodies remain on the mountain and have not been removed due to the dangerous conditions. Now, as morbid as it sounds, current climbers use these bodies as location markers, and green boots is one of them. Green boots is named for the colored boot the climber was wearing, and he is a landmark on the main northeast ridge route of Mount Everest. The body has not been officially identified, but it is believed to be Swang Pajor, an Indian climber who died on Everest in 1996. All expeditions from the north side encountered the body curled in the limestone alcove cave at 27,900 feet until it was moved in 2014. Green Boots was moved to a less conspicuous location by members of a Chinese expedition. Now in 2006, British mountaineer David Sharp was found in a hypothermic state in Green Boots cave by climber Mark Ingalls and his party. Mark continued to ascend after radioing for advice on how to help David, which he was unable to provide. Now David died of extreme cold some hours later. Approximately 36 other climbers would have passed by the dying man that day, and it had been suggested that those who noticed him mistook him for Green Boots and therefore paid little attention. Overall, it's just super sad, but I don't know why people would risk their lives for this. Now we have the Victorian British 8 mummies. Okay, so I've seen people talk about this before on Twitter, but I've never actually delved into this topic, and well, I think I should have left it that way. They first started with the Egyptian mummy, which was crumbled into a solution to stanch internal bleeding, but other parts of the body soon followed. Skull was one common ingredient taken in powdered form to cure head ailments. Even the moss that grew over a buried skull, called usnea, became a prized additive, powder believed to cure nosebleeds and possibly epilepsy. Human fat was used to treat the outside of the body, and doctors prescribed bandages soaked in it for wounds, and rubbing fat into the skin was considered to be a remedy for gout. Blood was procured as fresh as possible, while it was still thought to contain the vitality of the body, because yes, they used the blood for more remedies. Now thankfully the practice dwindled in the 18th century, around the time Europeans began regularly using forks for eating and soap for bathing, but all I gotta say is ew. Moving on to Karl Tanzler. I need to tell y'all about Karl Tanzler because he is just such a truly messed up man. In 1930, Karl believed he'd found his one true love. While working as a radiologist in Florida, he met a young Cuban-American woman, Maria Elena Magaro de Hoyos. She was suffering from tuberculosis and died the next year. Karl paid for her funeral and visited her mausoleum regularly. He was obsessed with Maria. Now, in the dead of night in 1933, he took her body from the mausoleum and back to his home in a red wagon. He put her skeleton back together using coat hangers, stuffed her with rags, and made her a wig from her own hair. She was dressed and put in his bed until 7 years later, following rumors of the destruction of her body, and he was discovered by police. While her body was covered with clothes, her face was a death mask of her former self, created by Carl and was kept in his bed after the coroner had removed the rest of her body. Now, unbelievably, the statute of limitations had expired and Carl's case was dismissed out of court, but yeah, there is just so much wrong with that. I am just speechless. Now we have the chainsaw invention. In 1780, two Scottish doctors invented the prototype of the chainsaw. Now this wasn't cutting down trees or anything, oh no. John Atkin and James Jeffrey invented the hand-cranked chainsaw to cut through the pelvises of delivering mothers who were having trouble pushing their babies out. And to make things worse, mothers were completely conscious throughout the entire process. Now that just hurts to think about. Now those women were just so strong. Now after seeing how well it worked out in the delivery room, well that is according to the male doctors, the machine was then co-opted to saw through wood and other materials, gradually growing in size to become the chainsaw we know today. Now thank God we've made more advancements when it comes to giving birth, because just wow. Then there's the brain-eating parasite. Naegleria fowleri is a free-living amoeba that is so small that it can only be seen with a microscope. It is commonly found in warm fresh water such as lakes, rivers, and hot springs, and soil. Now the parasite infects people when the water containing the amoeba enters the body through the nose. This typically happens when people go swimming, diving, or when they put their head under fresh water. The amoeba then travels up the nose to the brain, where it destroys the brain tissue and causes a devastating infection that is almost always fatal. Now the first symptoms usually start about 5 days after infection, but they can start within 1 to 12 days. Symptoms may include headache, fever, nausea, or vomiting. Later symptoms can include stiff neck, confusion, lack of attention to people and surroundings, seizures, hallucinations, and coma. After symptoms start, the disease progresses rapidly and usually causes death within about 5 days, but the death can happen within 1 to 18 days. Yeah, remind me to never swim in fresh water again. The Highway of Tears. The Highway of Tears is a 447-mile long corridor of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, Canada, which has been the location of crimes against missing and dead Indigenous women. Accounts vary as to the exact number of victims, but according to the RCMP Project EPANA, the number of victims is fewer than 18, while Indigenous organizations estimate that the number is higher than 40. In 2015, the federal government launched a national inquiry into the cases. That year, Carolyn Bennett, now a federal minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Canada, claimed that the national number of victims in Canada is likely over 1,200, which is just insane, and it's disgusting that no one really seems to care about these women and girls. Now, the region of the Highway of Tears is characterized by poverty and, until 2017, lacked adequate public transportation, which forced many locals to resort to hitchhiking as a form of transit. Now, this directly resulted in some of the deaths and disappearances. Some activists argue that institutional racism and sexism have affected the searches for these Indigenous women, and we just need to put more resources into these disappearances. Now we have burn degrees. We've all heard of first, second, and third degree burns, right? Well, what if I told you there also existed 4th, 5th, and 6th degree burns? But wait, isn't 3rd degree burns considered the worst? Apparently no. 4th degree burns occur when heat damage destroys the dermis and muscle tissue is affected. Like 3rd degree burns, 4th degree burns result in scarring and the loss of keratin, loss of hair shafts and fingernails and toenails. 5th degree burns happen when all the skin and subcutaneous tissues are destroyed, exposing muscle. These burns can be fatal due to damage to major arteries and veins. 5th degree burn injuries also may require amputation due to the damage to the muscles. Permanent and prominent scarring with the loss of keratin in the area of the burn will also occur. 6th degree burns occur when the heat destroys the muscles, charring and exposing the bone. These bones are almost always fatal, and just saying that gives me goosebumps. That's absolutely horrible. And while researching this topic, I made the right decision by not looking up any photos related to this, so be like me and please don't look at them. Up next we have Richard Chase. Richard Chase was a disturbed man, and in 1976 he was involuntarily committed to a mental institution when he was taken to a hospital after injecting rabbit's blood into his veins.
veins. Now while there, he broke the necks of 2 birds he caught and drank their blood. Chase was then diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and after undergoing treatments, he was deemed no longer a danger to society, and later that year he was released into his mother's custody. But just a year later, he claimed the life of his first victim. 2 weeks after the first death, he attempted to enter the home of a woman, but because her doors were locked, he walked away. Chase later told detectives that he took locked doors as a sign that he was not welcome, but unlocked doors were an invitation to come inside. Sir? Okay. Now, he ended the lives of more people, eating their organs and other body parts and drinking their blood. He eventually was caught and arrested, and police who searched his apartment found that the walls, floor, ceiling, refrigerator, and all of his eating and drinking utensils were soaked in blood. He was eventually found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree homicide, and the jury rejected the argument that he was not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced him to death. And lastly, we have the Lake Naos disaster. On August 21st, 1986, farmers living near Lake Naos heard rumbling. At the same time, a frothy spray shot hundreds of feet out of the lake, and a white cloud formed over the water. From the ground, the cloud grew 328 feet tall and flowed across the land. When farmers near the lake left their houses to investigate the noise, they lost consciousness. The heavy cloud sunk into the valley, and people in the affected areas collapsed. Over the next 2 days, people from the surrounding areas entered the valley to find the bodies of humans and cows lying on the ground. By August 23rd, the cloud had mostly blown away, and scientists soon learned that the cloud contained carbon dioxide, CO2. Now, when the CO2 concentration was 15% or less, people lost consciousness and later revived, but individuals who had inhaled more than 15% of CO2 stopped breathing within minutes and died. Scientists determined that the CO2 had been trapped at the bottom of Lake Naos for a long time and then erupted. Now, in the end, 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock died.
Issei Sagawa. This was a notorious Japanese criminal who is known for taking lives and consuming human flesh. He's known for ending the life of René Hartevelt in Paris in 1981. In 83, he was deemed unfit for trial by French medical experts and was initially held in a psychiatric institution before being deported to Japan in 1984. But upon his arrival, he was ruled sane by Japanese authorities, who decided his only problem was a character anomaly, and that he did not require hospitalization. Yeah, eating people, just a little character quirk, you know? Now, unfortunately, Japanese authorities were unable to get his case files from their French counterparts, who considered the case closed, leaving Issei to walk free. Now, he made no secret of his crime and capitalized on it as he wrote a memoir entitled In the Fog, where he reminisced about the crime in vivid detail. Despite the heinous details of the homicide and his lack of remorse, Issei gained a level of celebrity and regularly gave interviews to domestic and international media in the years after his return. He displayed no apparent sign of remorse or reform, telling Vice in a 2013 interview as he looked at posters of Japanese women, "I think they would taste delicious." Yeah, thankfully he died of pneumonia in November of 2022 and can't hurt or profit off anyone ever again. Next up, we have Angela Simpson. In 2009, Angela Simpson lured Terry Neely to her home with the promise of fun bedtime activities and illicit substances. Once inside the home, though, things took a very dark turn. Angela tormented the man for over 3 days, during which time she pulled the man's teeth out of his mouth and drove a nail into his head. And even more disturbing, she did all of this while Terry was seated in front of a mirror, so he was forced to watch all this play out. On the final day of the ordeal, Angela strangled and stabbed the man more than 50 times before dismembering his body and setting his remains on fire. In April of 2012, Judge Paul McCurdy sentenced Angela to natural life in prison plus 14 years for the homicide. The additional 14 years were given to Angela for convictions of abandonment of a body and kidnapping. During a prison interview after her sentencing, she was asked if she had any regrets she replied that she only regretted that she did not make the torment last longer. Her exact words were, "Not at all, why would I be?" During the interview, Angela said that Terry bragged to her about the number of people he'd put in jail by snitching, but the Phoenix Police Department had no record of Terry ever being an informant or telling on anyone. Still, Angela remained insistent that he was a snitch and that he got what he deserved. She also expressed that she was upset that she wasn't able to end the lives of any more snitches. Next up, we have Empress Wu. Empress Wu of China was on the throne from 690 to 705, and she was the only woman in China's history to have absolute rule. But she's not remembered in the best light. She was a cruel, merciless empress who enjoyed tormenting and ending the lives of others. Chinese history paints Empress Wu as a demonic woman who connived her way to power through homicide and deceit. In fact, historians at the time claimed that she, quote, killed her sister, butchered her elder brothers, murdered the ruler, and poisoned her mother. She is hated by gods and men alike. She's believed to have ended the lives of thousands of people. Her reign came to an end in a coup in 704. Members of her court forced her to yield power to her exiled son, Zongzong. In 705, she was in poor health and died. Her memorial tablet, which she had commissioned when she was an empress, was left purposefully blank, so future historians could compose an epitaph detailing her accomplishments, but over 1,000 years later, it still remains blank, her legacy completely unwritten. David Parker Ray. So this guy was a kidnapper, a tormentor, and suspected serial slayer, though no bodies were ever found. David was accused by his accomplices of ending the lives of several women and was suspected by the police to have ended the lives of as many as 60 women from Arizona and New Mexico while living in Elephant Butte, New Mexico. David was then convicted of kidnapping and torment in 2001. After his arrest, the police quickly obtained a warrant to search his home and trailer. What the authorities found inside the trailer shocked and disturbed them. He called the place his toy box. It contained a gynecologist-type table in the middle with a mirror mounted to the ceiling so that his victims could see the horrors delivered on them. Littering the floor were whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, and saws. They also found diagrams on the walls showing different methods of inflicting pain. He would even play like tapes telling these women what he was about to do to them once they were kidnapped. I've heard it, it's really disturbing. He died of a heart attack about 1 year after his convictions in 2 cases, the second of which resulted in a plea deal. Next up is Bela Kiss. This was a Hungarian serial slayer who lived in the beginning of the 20th century. In 1903, Bela began plotting his horrific crimes. He would place personal ads in newspapers claiming to be a lonely widower looking for marriage under the alias Hoffman. He would use this method to correspond with women and managed to convince some of them to give him their money and assets. Then he would lure them to his house so he could strangle them to death with rope or even his bare hands. Now, not only was that disturbing, but Bela sought to preserve the bodies of his victims. Specifically, he would pickle his victims' bodies in large steel drums filled with wood alcohol, methanol. He'd also drain the blood from the necks of his victims, earning him the nickname the Vampire of Sincata. He ended the lives of approximately 24 women. Tamerlane the Great. So this 14th century conqueror of Western, Central, and South Asia was known as Timur, and he considered himself to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. He took a lot of pride in it, which kind of tells you a lot about him. He was one of the most horrifying rulers in history, his rule being followed by cruelty and terror, which was responsible for destroying millions of people. He had various ways he would end people's lives, like forcing people to jump from cliffs and mountains, or getting up close and personal and just lobbing off their heads. He was also the one to order thousands of people to die of slow suffocation. He also enjoyed making towers out of human skulls. An estimated 15 to 20 million people died thanks to this lovely man. I'd also like to make a tower out of human skulls, just as long as I didn't, I wasn't responsible for their deaths. If I just found a bunch of skulls, I'd make a tower out of it, sure.
In our number 4 spot today, we have fatal familial insomnia. Fatal familial insomnia, or FFI, is an extremely rare and fatal genetic disorder that affects the brain. It is inherited in an autosomal dominant manner, which means that an affected person has a 50% chance of passing the disease on to their offspring. The onset of FFI usually occurs somewhere in the middle of life and is characterized by progressive insomnia, which worsens over time and is accompanied by hallucinations, delirium, and eventually dementia. The disease can progress rapidly, with death occurring within a few months to a few years after the onset of symptoms. FFI is caused by a mutation in the PRNP gene, which leads to the formation of an abnormal prion protein in the brain. This protein accumulates and damages brain tissue, leading to the symptoms of FFI. Unfortunately, there is no cure for FFI, and treatment is really limited to just alleviating symptoms. Research into the disease is ongoing, and scientists hope to one day find a cure or a way to prevent the disease from developing. Searching this terrifying and very real disorder can lead you to the terrifying world of prions and all of the horrors that surround them. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Dyatlov Pass incident. Okay, if you want to be a part of one of the most enduring mysteries, then you need to learn about the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you've never heard of it, basically in February of 1959, 9 young Soviet hikers sent out to trek through the Ural Mountains. They had set up a camp, and sometime during the night, something happened that made them cut their way out of the tent and all flee the site. Leaving in such a rush, they were of course underdressed for the bitterly cold weather, and 6 of them ended up passing away from hypothermia, which is extremely tragic. The other 3, however, is where this story takes a very frightening turn. Like I mentioned before, no one knows why they fled the tent in the first place, and the last 3 hikers were found passed away with severe signs of physical trauma that no one could agree on what had caused it. In 2019, the investigation was reopened, and just a couple years ago there was a conclusion that a kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche was the cause for these injuries. Before you come at me in the comments, I know not everyone is convinced that's what happened, and I don't blame you. Many people don't agree with this quote official conclusion, and when you learn about the nature of the injuries, it really does seem strange. This remains one of those cases that people just can't quite agree on what happened, and learning about it only leaves you with more questions than answers. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Heuerbach monster. This monster is a mysterious creature that has allegedly been sighted in the dense forests of Germany. It is said to be a humanoid creature standing over 7 feet tall with long arms and a muscular build covered in matted fur. Witnesses describe it as having a broad, flat face with glowing eyes and large fangs protruding from its mouth. The first reported sighting of this monster dates back to the early 20th century, but there have been numerous sightings reported in the decades since. Many locals believe it to be a malevolent being, and there are stories of it attacking and killing livestock and even humans who venture too close to its territory. Despite numerous attempts to capture or study the creature, there is no concrete evidence of its existence that has ever been found, and some skeptics dismiss this monster as nothing more than a myth or legend, but others remain convinced that it is a real, undiscovered species lurking in the forests. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the cattle crimes. Adding one more enduring unsolved mystery to this list, we have these crimes which were revealed when a set of documents became declassified, and they described this super grim FBI investigation that took place in the mid-1970s at the request of US Senators Floyd Haskell of Colorado and Carl Curtis of Nebraska. I guess there was some weird sort of connection between these horrific things being done to cattle across as many as 21 states. In a letter from 1975, Senator Haskell was able to identify 130 of these strange, macabre cases in Colorado alone. All of the cases were eerily similar, which is unsettling considering the details. In most cases, the cattle would have their left ear, left eye, rectum, and reproductive organ all missing, and all the blood was drained from the carcass, but there was no blood on the ground around them, nor were there any footprints. How absolutely horrifying is that? Some people chose to believe that the cause for these was mysterious helicopters and UFOs, but there's a letter from Senator Curtis to the FBI director that says, quote, "The series of incidents stretching from Oklahoma to Nebraska in which cattle have been dismembered in some kind of strange witchcraft cult." I'm not gonna lie, I don't think UFOs or witches did it. It wasn't until 1979 that the FBI was granted jurisdiction to begin investigating these weird happenings, and when they did, they determined that most of the instances were the result of quote normal predator and scavenger activity. And while that answer sounds a little fishy, the documents went forward to reveal that not all of the instances could be accounted for. Also, this idea of it being a completely normal scenario also contradicts reports that say that the techniques used in these horrible instances were quote very professional and sometimes even referred to as being conducted with surgical precision. I'm sorry, but a wolf or a coyote or a bear or whatever predator you want to say did this, ripping apart its meal isn't exactly a surgically precise operation. No arrests were ever made, and while it was deemed solved, a ton of mystery still surrounds these stories to this day.